It's a damp, foggy morning in the mountains of southern Appalachia. I'm going to walk around in our garden and give you a garden tour and show you what's going on, what's not going on. If you hear something in the background, we've had a lot of rain, a lot of like heavy thunderstorms in the last 2 weeks, and our driveway most of it is at the bottom of the driveway, all the gravel. So that's Matt working on the driveway if you hear some noise during the tour. In a recent video, someone asked if on my next garden tour, or maybe just dedicate a video to it, would I talk about what we liked, you know, what the changes we made this year that we liked, and what would we do different next year. As a gardener, you're always thinking about next year. Matt and I are already both planning and scheming about what we want to do next year. So as I go around today, I'll try to remember that and point out things that I think we would do again, or things that we won't do, or maybe we'll adjust a little bit. Much of what we do, though, we've been gardening for so long, is the things like the tried and true are the things that we do every year, but there's always room for improvement, always room to try new things when you're growing food to feed your family. I'll start with this part behind me. This is a cattle panel here that we've had a couple of years, and we grow beans on it. And they've grew really well ever since we first planted them, first used it. Green beans are something that we grow especially well. It's one of the easier things to grow if you're new to gardening. Green beans typically are pretty easy for most folks to grow. It's real handy that it's right outside the kitchen door. I've always enjoyed that. But what we planted, when we didn't do it actually for the green beans. We've just been planting green beans there. The first year that we put the cattle panel there, we had in mind that it would be for grapevines. So there are 2 grapevines on this part over here, one at each end of that section of panel. And the very first year, the grapevines we had, they died the first winter. They just didn't make it. They didn't come back the next year, so then we had to replant. So the ones we've got planted there now, the first year, of course, they was rather puny, and so we continued to grow beans on it. This past spring and summer, what's happened is they've really took off. They don't have any grapes on them, but they put up a lot of vines, of grapevines. So next year it'll be interesting to see if we can still put green beans there or not. What I would love to see happen, though, of course I'm not going to move the grapevines, we want grapes, so we'll let that, if the grapes do continue to flourish next year and kind of take over that'll be just dedicated to the grapes. But maybe just on this side of it, maybe Matt could build another small bed like that and put one more row of cattle panels there, and we could just dedicate those to either green beans or peas or something like that climbs. One of the things I definitely want to change next year really don't have nothing to do with the garden, it has to do with us. I hope we don't have a year full of the things we've had this year with Miss Cindy having cancer and dying, and then Granny being sick and looks likely that she has cancer too, and other things that have been going on. It's just like we've not even been able to pay attention to our garden. And one of the worst things that has suffered is our blackberries up there. I'm ashamed for you even to see them. They've not been weeded one time, and there's this really annoying weed. I had my phone to figure out what it was. It's a mulberry weed, is like one of the common names for it. And it starts setting seed like when it's this big and dropping them. So it is prolific. It just goes everywhere. And that's actually the first bed I noticed it in a couple of years ago. And all I can think is it come with the blackberry plants when I first planted some new blackberries, canes up there. But it's took over in lots of different places it's trying to, and I've done a pretty good job of keeping it out of some of the areas, mostly up here in one of my flower beds. I've done pretty good about the flower bed, but we've not even touched that bed. It's really bad. I'm tempted to just cut all the blackberries off completely back to the ground and pull all those weeds up that we can, and then fertilize it really good, maybe put a layer of mulch on it. Maybe that's how we'll put it to bed this year. But that's definitely something that next year I hope we're able to do, is stay on top of the weeding more than we have this year. One of the things that I really love this year, and I'm glad we did, was that bed over there, that we made our herb bed in that bed. When we had the work done on the bank and Thomas graded out the places for us to put the beds on the bank, I really loved that too. Those have been great. But we were in debate about what to do with our herb bed because it kind of got demolished in that process. And we went back and forth. Matt saved all the tin. It's also a busy year for our house. We had the roof replaced and we were going to build a bed out of tin. Well, with all the stuff going on with Miss Cindy, it just wasn't happening. So we decided just to buy a bed. Well, I've really loved it, and the herbs have really loved it too. My chamomile's the best that I've ever grown, and all the other things in it have done very, very well. There's one little slight thing we'll have to change before next year. I've never grown lemongrass. Miss Cindy grew it the whole time she's lived out here, and her plant never got more than just, you know, very small, and then it would die back over winter. Well, when I was very first showing the herb bed, someone said, you should be careful with that lemongrass, it'll take over. And I thought, oh, well, I never knew Miss Cindy's didn't take over. Well, they were definitely right. It's not took over, but it's just large. So this winter, that'll definitely be something I'm gonna, as soon as cold weather gets here, I'm going to move that and hope it comes back next year. It might not, but I'm going to move it somewhere else, so in case it does, it won't take up that much space in the herb bed. But that's been one of my favorite things this year, is that herb bed for sure. And then if you watch the girls' videos, Katie and Corey's, you'll know about this little rock bed here that Katie built. I really like it too. It's really beautiful. After she got it built, and she's primarily building it for her poppies, but she's also going to put some, she said she's going to put another onion forest in it. She had me an onion forest in the herb bed, and we eat all the onions. Of course, they're gone now. But she said she might add some onions to it. But once she got it built, and it looked so pretty, and it was a lot of work. She had to go to the creek and get the rocks and all that. But I said, how about you just build those all the way out through the yard? And she said, well, I might. Anyway, I know that's going to be really a pretty addition too. It'll be full next year of flowers. She's got a few things growing in it now, you can see, but I'm not sure how much between now and cold weather, how much enjoyment she'll get out of those. This is another area that I've really enjoyed this year. It's kind of a wild, chaotic mess right now, but you can see there's nasturtiums, there's the sunflowers, there's these beautiful cosmos that were supposed to be miniature, and they're literally as tall as I am. Let me see if I can show you this one, how tall it is. Just keeps going and going and going and going. They're beautiful, just very, very tall. I was hoping those cosmos would be real small because I had so much else going on in this bed. It's so full, as you can see. There's some hostas. This is the bed, if you've watched our videos, you'll remember that we moved the irises out of with the hopes of planting them on the bank. And all the ones I managed on the bank in front of the raised beds, all the ones I managed to get planted up there are living, so hopefully next year they'll spread some. But we didn't. There's still irises in here that need to be removed. There's still hostas. And then the strangest thing has happened over the last 2 years. This beautiful, look at that beautiful anemone. It's called September Charm. So you can see it's, whoops, that one fell off in my hands there. But it's just now beginning to bloom, and it'll kind of bloom all the way through till September. It's really beautiful. Here's a close-up of it so you can see how beautiful it is. I've had this plant probably at least 15, if not 20 years, and it's been in this one place back here. It's where I had it, where I started it. My aunt shared it with me, and I've just loved it. It's been here for 15 years. It barely moved. I might have 1 or 2 each year. In the last 2 years, what has happened is, you can see, it has just taken over this whole area. I moved 1 or 2 of them just because I liked it so much, and, you know, thought, well, it just stays kind of compact and doesn't move. I moved one piece of it up to my flower bed in front of my kitchen window, and it's done the same thing in the last 2 years. It's completely taken over. Now, someone told me a nice commenter, a nice subscriber shared with me that they researched and that it can become invasive. Now, why it took, you know, over 10 years to become invasive at my house, I'm not sure. But that's definitely a project for this year, to move some of that. And I'm going to move it directly over there to the bank, you know, in front of those raised beds or behind them or around them or whatever. Not in front of them, I don't guess. We wouldn't be able to get to them. Anyway, to those areas that were disturbed, and hope that it does take over there. It's a beautiful, beautiful plant. It's just that I had other things in here. Like you can see down there is some yarrow that's barely peeking through. We had other things in here. There's some lamb's ear. I planted a lot of zinnias and things like that, and it just got completely took over by the remaining irises and the anemone that went crazy. And of course those giant cosmos, but it's still a beautiful, beautiful area. And the little sunflowers are definitely something. I want to plant a lot of them next year. And I don't remember the name of them, but when I come back across that seed packet, I will for sure share it with you. But they've just turned out so pretty, so lovely. I just love them. They're kind of on their way out now, but they've been a real ray of sunshine. This area behind me, there's 2 beds, and then they're connected by an arch that Matt made out of the cattle panels. It's kind of been a disappointment this year. And a lot of it is my fault for planting the big marigolds that I thought were little marigolds. And when I realized they were that big, I probably should have just pulled them up, but I didn't. And then the unusual cooler weather that we had at the beginning of the summer kind of stunted our peppers. So we've got peppers, but nothing like we usually do. Nothing at all. The cucumbers, we've got tons of cucumbers. You know, that's been great, but I've been fighting the cucumber bug all summer long. And it just got so overgrown. On the back, there's a big borage plant. Again, it's beautiful, but I probably should have, once it was through kind of its first flush, I probably should have kept it in check. I didn't have time to do any of those things, though, truthfully, this year. So, although this has provided us with bounty, there's some tomatoes in there, there's the peppers, and definitely a lot of cucumbers. I think there's about 3 cantaloupes over there growing. They're about that big. Maybe they'll turn ripe and I'll get to eat one of them. But it's not done as good as it usually does, I guess is what I would say. So probably a variety of reasons. And it's just kind of overwhelming jungle at the moment. At the end of summer is my least favorite time of the year. I love all the times, whether it's cold or it's in the spring or it's the heat of sweating in summer. I love it all. But this time of the year, it's when everything kind of takes on I call it a rusty. I don't know, when I was little, people, my granny or whoever might say, you need to wash your feet better, they're rusty. It's kind of dirt grained into your skin is what it would be from playing outside barefooted all day. So maybe you get rusty behind your ears too if you don't wash back there good. Anyway, that's what it reminds me of. It just takes on this kind of a rusty look around all the edges of the leaves, and certainly the places where it's dying back, like our cucumbers that have about give up the ghost with the bugs. Makes me wish I could just remove it all. I say if I had a magic wand, I'd just make it all go back. Jack Frost will bring the magic wand for me. Once the big first heavy frost comes, it'll die back a lot. But me and Matt plan, hopefully in the next week or so, to actually tear a lot of this out, and we're going to start thinking about what we're going to plant for fall. So that'll help my feeling of not liking those rusty places. This is only the 2nd year that we've grew back here behind the greenhouse, and Matt wants to do something different. He wants to put a bed back here. He wants to get up off the ground. I remind him that this is only the 2nd year that we've enriched this, so it will keep getting better. So I'm not sure if we'll build a bed or if we'll just let it go like it is this year. It has done better this year than it did last year, even though I had to replant everything because of a squirrel or something eating my seeds. You can see we've still got lots of blooms, and there's a pumpkin back there. Hopefully they will, it'll have time to ripen before fall of the year, before cold weather gets here. You can see we've got lots of ground cherries back here. None of them ripe yet, or I'd open one and show you. Also, right in the middle of it, here is one of the lychee tomatoes. It's been about 2 years since I tried them. You can see it's kind of a plant that's got sharp thorns all over it. Even the leaves have them along the edges there. And nobody liked it but me. So it's kind of more of a fruit than a tomato. And I read that people used to plant them around the border of their gardens, like for protection because of those thorns, to keep things out. Anyway, from that 1 year of growing them, they kind of reseeded themselves in lots of different places, got in our compost. I'm sure that's how they ended up back here. So I've just let this one grow, even though I didn't plant it. I don't see any tomatoes, any of the little lychee tomatoes on it yet. The bees obviously like it. So maybe I'll at least get to taste 1 or 2 of them before cold weather. There's another one hiding back in there. Lots and lots of blooms. We're about to run out of time though there's 2 bees down in that flower. About to run out of time for the length of time needed for them to actually grow and then ripen. Another thing that I've really loved this year, just like I did last year, is this place outside the greenhouse door where we planted things. Only thing I would do different is maybe, you know, I've got to think about the mint. I let it take over, but it's okay. It's fine. It needs to be harvested. I love the nasturtiums. You can see some more of my, back here, some more of the, I think that was rosemary. Yeah, rosemary. Oh, it smells so good, so good. I should just take that in and sleep with it. It smells so good. Dry it and eat it would be better. But the ones in the back, like I have a big container back there, because of the overhang of the greenhouse, they don't get water as much. I mean, they don't get water from the rain, and because of my busy year, I've neglected the ones in the back. There's just a spider laying in wait for something. Of course, the bees, they're everywhere. That's always a joy to watch them. This has just turned lovely, kind of took over that whole bed. That's a bloom. I didn't even know that they had blooms. Coleus, it's really pretty. I got it at the Satterfields, and look how great it's grew all summer. So all the ones that I had around it, same thing was happening. The overhang was keeping the water off of them. So I just pulled them out here, ramshackle-y looking, and just left them where at least they could get some rain. I was most concerned about this one. This is going to be a pink calendula, so at least I'm going to get to see it. It may not be as beautiful as it would have been if I'd have been caring for it all summer, but at least I'll still get to see the bloom. This part of our garden is tomato land. This is where all our tomatoes are. This big bed down through here, we have the Cherokee Purple and then some Tommy Toes mixed in with them. We have right here behind me is this wonderful, beautiful arch of Malabar spinach that we just love. And I will grow it from now on as long as I ever have a garden. I'm just crazy about it. I love now that it reseeds itself and comes back, so I don't even have to plant it, which is wonderful. Then off to this side is our Tommy Toes, which have just done the best they've ever done this year. They're beginning to wind down, and mostly they're suffering, them and the tomatoes over here, from us not taking care of them like we normally would. We've not trimmed on them. We've not cut back the brown places or the kind of diseased looking places like we usually would. A lot of the Tommy Toes in the last week I've lost to the rain, where they got so wet they split because they needed to be picked. So I guess the theme of our garden is we just hope to do better next year. Hope to not have, of course you would hope not to have horrendous heartache in your family, seeing your loved ones suffer. That's the main thing, regardless of about the garden. But for me and Matt, the big thing of the garden is just that we would be more attentive like we usually are. This has just not been the year that we had time to do the things we normally do. The plants we planted in our first raised bed on the bank, or the first as you come up the driveway, are kind of holding their own. They've not grew like I was hoping they would. The nettle has grew some down there. The self-heal, it's grew the most probably. And I do see on the feverfew some little blooms. So hopefully before cold weather, I'll at least get to see their bloom and see what they look like. And maybe they'll even reseed themselves and come back here next year. There's not much in this bed. This is some Egyptian onions that I brought up here and got started. They were about this big when I first planted them. We have them growing in another part of the garden, but I thought it would be really nice to have them up here out of the way of everything else. The area they're in is where we put our winter squash, where the blueberries are, where there's garlic, and they just kind of get lost in the mess of everything else. But if we could get them started up here and they would just take over this bed, that would be really great, and we could enjoy them throughout the winter, because most of the time weather doesn't get cold enough here to really wipe them all out, and it's something we enjoy, eating that fresh onion during the winter. This next bed is probably the prettiest raised bed up here on the bank at the moment. You can see the beautiful marigolds are just doing great. There's another one over there on that end. And then the squash that I planted are really taking off. I don't see any blooms yet, but they've just grew by leaps and bounds since the last garden tour that I did. So maybe this is what squash plants are supposed to look like, not like my little pitiful ones down in the other part of the garden. So maybe I'll get a few squash from these. The watermelons right here, this is a perfect example of something that we did different this year that worked pretty good, but still needs to be tweaked. You can see back there is one of my largest, that's probably the largest watermelon I'll grow this year. I've got a few more up here. So the watermelons really loved being in this grow bag. I think it was because they were up off the ground and maybe heat and maybe they could get more air. We did fertilize them at least twice. We should have done it more than that. But they really enjoyed it. The only thing I would tweak is we should have put these down low on the ground where it wasn't hard to get up here on the bank and water them, because they did dry out once or twice, and then it was a pain to carry water up here and actually water them. So I think we'll do this next year, maybe even on a larger scale, have more than just the two, but definitely put them off the bank closer to the house where they're really easy to water if they do dry out. This is one of the really success stories of the raised beds this year. This is our Mississippi pink eye peas. You can see they're just loaded, just hanging full. They're just beautiful. I have a really sad story to tell you about them though. I picked the first mess a couple of days ago and couldn't wait to cook them. They were going to be so good. We were so looking forward to it. I put them on to cook, and then I got busy and I forgot about them. And I scorched them. I mean, I scorched them, burned them up. So there was no first mess of peas because of my forgetfulness. But hopefully as many as that's here and they're getting really full, I'll be able to really have the first mess. And this time I'm promising myself if I have to stand over it and watch it the whole time it cooks, I'm not going to forget about them and scorch them. I'm still just in awe of this area of the garden. This is our asparagus bed. And the asparagus have just grown by leaps and bounds this year, probably because we fertilized it really well. The sunflowers are beginning to fall over. They've got so tall, but isn't that beautiful? So pretty. This is the wonderful area where the volunteers are growing out of our compost. So there's one of the butternut squash. There's a lot of pumpkins, a lot of butternut squash, and even some tomatoes that volunteer. So in the middle of all the chaos, a lot of goodness too. This part of the garden is still going really well. Our 2 long rows of beans are still producing. Our okra has finally started coming in, and it took off very slowly this year. I think it was that cooler start to summer that we had, but now it's coming in really well. I've already pulled up our cabbage that was down through there. I don't know, we pulled it up I guess about a week ago, and it did very well this year. There was a few, which is usually, since we've been covering it underneath the covers, growing it like that, we do that to protect it from bugs, and that really helps. Now, there's always still some plants that die for some unknown reason or don't do as good as other ones, just like if you planted it out from under the cover. But overall, it was a very good harvest. We had 1 or 2 that had kind of, not really rotted, but shriveled up on the top. Their little heads was just almost like mummified or something. There was 2 or 3 like that, but the rest of them were good. Some of them were bigger than others, but overall, a really good crop of cabbage for us. I guess the one thing that didn't do as well down here as it normally does is these 2 rows of tomatoes that, if you've watched our videos, you know we had trouble. The tomatoes up there were great. The ones down here, for some reason, just started dying on us pretty early in the summer. Thinking about next year, we'll likely do everything right here the same way that we did, although Matt wants to, he's got something in his mind he wants to do for those tomatoes. He wants to get them up off the ground. If I had just unlimited time and really could reach every goal, I would love to dig up a lot of my hostas here in front of the porch and just separate them and share them with others. They're just getting so large that they take over anything else I plant there. Like if I tried to plant impatiens or something like that, they just completely take over. So that's like a real wish list I wish I could do before next year, but I don't really think it'll happen. All of the beans up here have been producing, and we've been eating them and canning them, except these on the very end. There's the first one of the bean, one of the beans that Debbie from Brasstown Farm Supply shared with us, that's like a paint bean. The little bean has a brown place on it. So I can't wait to see what it looks like once it continues to grow. It's just been very slow, a very slow growing bean. So this bottom area of the garden is where all of our winter squash is, pumpkins and candy roasters, green and white striped cushaws. This is also where we planted zucchini and squash, just yellow summer squash. We've not got 1 yellow summer squash. I have 2 zucchinis that are about that big, so I am going to get at least 1 or 2 zucchinis. And then there's tons of winter squash. They've done really well, like they do most of the time. The other thing we had planted down here was watermelons, and they've not done any good at all, the ones down here. I replanted them, still didn't do any good. Maybe it was that cool, unusually cool start to summer, might have been. We never have really great luck with watermelons because we just don't have enough sunshine here on the north side of the mountain, but this year was even worse. I hope you enjoyed seeing how the garden's doing here in the middle of August almost. It's on its way out for sure. There's so many things in a garden that are symbolic for life, you know, especially what we've been going through this year. So many different ways to look at that new growth and then the death that happens at the end of the year. It also symbolizes hope. I think most gardeners, or especially if you have the tenacity to continue gardening for a long period of time, you got to have hope, because there's always something that doesn't go well, whether it's like our squash and zucchini this year, or maybe your tomatoes got the blight, or the squirrels dug up your seeds and you had to replant. There's always something, and you got to have that hope to keep trying, to try it again and again and again, and see what happens. And along with that hope comes the excitement. Already getting excited, me and Matt both are, thinking about next year. You know, we want to put the grow bags down here where we can get to them easier as far as watering, and try just tomatoes in them and just cantaloupe and things like that in those, muskmelons, try that. Matt's talking about the new beds, so that'll be interesting to see if that happens. There's always, you know, little bits and pieces here and there that you want to do the same, but it's exciting to think about the new things. Like I've discovered I love those sunflowers, those dwarf sunflowers. I really want to work on that flower bed and underneath Katie's window back there and get it really nice. It was so much nicer this year, but I know once we move those anemones, it'll be even better. Hopefully the anemones will do well on the bank. Wouldn't that be beautiful to have a bank full of anemones? It'd be hard for them to take over in that red clay, but they might. They might. It might take them another 10 or 15 years, but they might. Making a garden is such a huge part of my life. You know, I grew up doing it with Granny and Pap, and grew up with Granny crazy about her flowers, and my grandmothers and my aunts. So there's that, but it's also part of the culture of Appalachia, growing a garden, making a garden for your family, to feed your family, growing your food. It's just such an integral part of life that I couldn't imagine not being able to do it. So someone might say, you know, well, in the very beginning, you knew Miss Cindy was sick and things might get bad. Maybe you should have just took a year off. But I just don't think I could do that. You know, even though things have not, we've not been able to manage them as well, it's still amazing the bounty that our garden has brought us this year. Amazing the food we've put up that we'll enjoy this winter. And it's just been a joy, the times that I could get away, which wasn't much, but the times that I could get away, even just sitting here with you this morning, sitting here and looking around at the growth of I can see the Malabar spinach, I can see the bounty, beyond bounty of the Tommy toes here behind me, I can smell the herbs. You know, it's just beautiful, just wonderful to be out and to notice those little things, even if you just get to steal away from a moment. Since I've been doing videos, I encourage people to grow something, and I understand people they're not physically able, and they don't have the space that me and Matt have. I'm always bemoaning the fact that we don't have much space here on the Goat Bluff, but I understand we have way more space than lots of people. So there's all those handicaps, but even if you just have a little pot and you have your little aloe plant, or you put a little spinach or lettuce or kale seed in a little pot, and you just manage just that little pot, it does something to your heart, blesses you somehow to grow things. It's just a really rewarding thing. Or even a flower. I mean, it doesn't have to be something you eat. It could be a flower. It could be a cactus even, you know, just to nurture it. It really does something good for your heart. So I encourage everyone to do that. I'm always grateful when you stop by to help me celebrate Appalachia, which, as I said, for me is a whole lot about making a garden.